Hello and welcome to the Aeon 14 podcast. My name is Lisa Richmond and I'm joined here with the Aeon 14 team, including the genius behind the brand, Michael Cooper. On board today, we've got our editor, Jen McDonald, wonderful and talented authors, Amy Duboff and Jenny Green. And today we're going to talk about Aeon 14, all things Aeon 14. And specifically today, we're going to talk about technology run amok and how science fiction does the human condition so beautifully. And so before we get into all of this, let's talk about some updates. Michael?
All right. So the bad news is that I've had to move Earth and Ascendancy out. So everybody shed a tear. I realized as I was writing some of the parts that it was too easy for some of the characters to do what they were doing. I need to make it way harder for them. There was a lot of things, a lot of complications that I realized needed to come into play, and that was just going to take me more time to do a good job at. So it's actually going to come out December 13th now. I've got to do some shuffling because the fan fiction book and Impulse Shock are also coming out December 13th. So I'm going to see what I can move around. And I might need to move Rika out as well, because I think Rika is going to take a little more time to flesh out and think through than I have now. I believe that Killshot and Vesta Burning are still going to be on track for 2 weeks from, well, I guess about a week and a half-ish from now, depending on when you see this. Around November 22nd to 25th is when they're coming out. So that's my plan for that. I won't go through the full list because I don't even know exactly when everything's going to come out with all the details right now, but I'm going to be shuffling a few things out if I can. I discovered that Amazon, once you shuffle one thing out, they remove your ability to shuffle anything else out. So I've got to try and get with them and see if I can make some moves. We're all a little bit tired. Well, except for Jenny's a little bit tired because the time shift has now made this 11 o'clock for her instead of 10 o'clock. And the rest of us have all come back from Vegas, so we're all tired because of that. So.
I slept for 13 hours and I'm still tired. International flights are rough.
I know, I'm up at 9 in the morning. For Amy, of course, that's what?
6 p.m.
9 in the morning is, you're 6 hours off?
Yeah, 6
yeah, so it's 3 in the afternoon. Amy's like, I'm tired.
And Jen and I are just kind of zombieing our way through the day.
Yeah. Jen and Sleep are not close friends, so she doesn't really know anything about what it's all about. But yeah, we had a great time in Vegas. We talked with a ton of people. I had some really cool stuff. I had some folks that were telling me that so I write books a book on Facebook ads, and I help people with how to do advertising in books and whatnot. I've had some people tell me that it was like a life-changing thing for them to read my book and apply my stuff. So I'm pretty stoked about that.
That's got to make you feel awesome.
It was really cool. Like some people were telling me that they went from making $300 a month to $15,000 a month after reading my book on ads. So I'm sure a lot of that had to do with the fact that they had stuff that they were able to make it all work well, not just me. But I was happy to be a part of that. So yeah, and we had some great authors there. There was like Dean Wesley Smith, who's written like half the science fiction books in existence, was there.
And his wife.
And his wife, yeah, Catherine Christine Rush. Is that her name?
Christine Catherine Rush.
I always get that mixed up. Who's also I've written roughly half the science fiction books out there. Actually, she writes more science fiction than he does, now that I think about it. He's more
she
like...
calls herself the grandma of science fiction.
Right. Yeah.
Kept calling herself grandma.
In my mind, sometimes I get Dean Wesley Smith mixed up with Kevin J. Anderson, who has also written half of the science fiction books out there.
So, mathematically, we're kind of...
That's a lot of halves.
Yeah, I know. They've written more
I mean,
than...
considering how many books you have, Michael, I think we need to rework these numbers a bit.
That's probably true. I mean, Michael Angeli said he's releasing 400 books this year, so...
Holy guacamole. We need to ramp things... No,
I'm all ramped. I'm as ramped as I can get, Lisa.
He has way more co-authors.
Oh, yeah. Actually, if you think about the number of co-authors we have versus the number of co-authors he has, we actually, author to author, we actually outperform, I think. So I'm going with that. Not that that's the goal or anything like that.
No.
For me, it's just I need to get all these stories written before we die. That's I've only got like 30 solid years of story writing left in me here, so I've got to pump them out. That a number of fans have told me that I have to finish the Orion War before they die. So that sounds kind of morbid, doesn't it? I'm going to stop on this particular train of thought now. We got to play test Snark, which was awesome. We didn't get to do a full game on the final rule set, so I almost wonder if we can maybe do that via Zoom somehow. Although I don't know how you would do that with different decks of cards and everything. That might not work.
Ooh, that's something we can research if they have online card playing.
Yeah,
like
there must be tons of online card playing games where you can just sort of like wing it and like.
Oh,
Like
you
that.
need to make Snark online. If I don't know how hard that would be, but that would be fun.
I don't think it'd be that hard. I mean, it's a 52 card game, so.
If you can play Hearts online, I think there's a way to program Snark.
Yeah, I could probably find someone that could do that. All right, that particular segue aside, so I am gonna actually. I think that the way we have it works really well. I'm gonna do up a rules document, and maybe some of the fans can play it as well and stuff like that, and then we'll see if it'll work. I'll make some sort of pretty document with all the rules. I'm fiddling with Serenity here, so if anybody sees this thing fly by, it's because this is what's keeping me from chewing my fingernails this morning. I have to fiddle, otherwise I'm doing that the whole time. The podcasts don't work that well with your hands in your mouth.
One of the other things that we did in Vegas was that Andrew and Michael signed all of the calendars.
That's right.
And Andrew got carpal tunnel from it.
Yep. Yeah, Andrew signed every page in every calendar, except of course the Rika page, because he didn't do that art. But other than that, he signed them all, and he signed the cover books, all the cover books I have, the art and covers. So when I'll be packaging those up and mailing them out. Well, packaging up today and tomorrow, mailing them out on Tuesday, since everything's closed on Monday. And folks will start getting those in the mail pretty shortly. And finally, for Timothy Van Osterwerk, not for Timothy, for Alistair Reynolds, I finally have, because I think he watches these, I finally have in print Rika. Well, the blue didn't come out too easy to read, but I finally have Rika Unleashed in print. So I owe him like roughly 700 books. So he's finally going to get all of his books. I was going to send him the Rikas, but then he went and bought them on his own. So I'll have a full collection now. And then actually all of the books that I owe will actually all be sent. It'll be wonderful. Aww. So then people will need to order more. If anyone lives in the UK and you want to order books, I'm going to share a number of places, but just let me know separately, and I can do combined shipping for folks in the UK, because it can be prohibitively expensive otherwise to send things to the UK. I think that's it for updates, unless I've missed other things that Lisa knows about.
Not that I can think of. I think that's pretty solid there.
Cool.
So we
mentioned Tau Ceti.
Sorry, which?
Is Tau Ceti an update? Tau Ceti.
Oh, the fact that, right, it is. It's out and it's on sale right now too.
As is the first book in the Infield Genesis series, Alpha Centauri.
Yep.
They're both 99 cents through Thursday?
Yep, I'm only doing till Wednesday this week.
Wednesday. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, so you can get both of those for 99 cents, and the second book is the regular price. And of course, the fourth book, Epsilon Eridani, is on pre-order as well. So,
I started that this weekend. And
yeah, I'm sitting here like recovering from coming back from Vegas, where I'm like sleepy at night and whatnot. Actually, I was still at Vegas, and Lisa was already home because she flew a day earlier, and she's like bombarding me. I'm like on my phone, like barely able to focus on the screen. I'm getting like these novel length posts from Lisa in our chat that we use about all of her plans and whatnot. I'm like, looks good. Yep. Actually, I can't say things to you, Jenny. You were like sending me all these things you wanted to do, and they did look good. I wasn't actually just sort of brushing you off. Your ideas all looked great. So that's fun. And Lisa and I have a plan because of course the first three books in Enfield Genesis are about these AIs that get that they leave the Sol system after the Sentience Wars, and they think they're going to a place where they're going to be better off in Alpha Centauri, and unfortunately they run afoul of a cartel that captures them all and sells them all, which kind of really sucks for them. And you think about you think well, the war's over, or how would this still be happening? Oh my goodness, Jen's being assaulted by her dog. Or at least her dog's bark. This is me trying to peer around her screen, which of course doesn't work. We need 3D cameras so you can look around in someone else's apartment. So anyway, we still have slavery on Earth, all sorts of different types of slavery, and it's abolished pretty much everywhere. So of course it would still exist for the AIs even after it was abolished for them as well. So the first three stories follow this arc of trying to rescue and free all these AIs. But the next three stories are going to be a little bit more about interstellar trade and trade routes and establishing the Enfield business that eventually has enough money to build this ship called the Intrepid. As they develop all these trade routes and whatnot, and possibly they encounter some rival companies that are also trying to establish interstellar trade. Because as after the end of the Sentience Wars, Sol is really no longer the center. I mean, it's large. It's still. I mean, there needs to be a word like instead of geographically, like astrographically.
Yeah.
Sol is still astrographically the
Geocentric.
center of most of human expansion, but because it got trashed so badly in the Sentience Wars, a lot of the colonies now are more interested in trading with one another than they are in these, because there are some trade routes that still go back and forth between Sol and the colonies, so we're going to be getting into more of that. And of course, they're going to go to, our plan right now is for them to go to Epsilon Eridani. Look, it makes a great pointer too. My little Serenity. Epsilon Eridani. Then they're going to boot over to Sirius. And as you all know by now, if you remember, Sirius is a hot mess with the Noctis and the Lucent. And if you've recently read, because I know some people have been rereading things because they've been dying with this 3-week gap that we had. Jen is like, what's wrong, Jen?
Lucent? What are the Lucent?
The Noctis and the Lucent?
Remember in Building Victoria back in Sirius, there was the Noctis, who were basically the slaves, and the Lucents. The Lucents are the Lumens. Lucent and Lumen is the same thing.
Oh, okay. That was sorry.
I got confused by that too.
I've got too many words for you.
Noctilucent. You were taking the word Noctilucent.
I was. You're right. This is, you know what? This is actually me. I screwed up. You're right, Jen.
Yes.
There it is. The Noctilucent and the Lumens. I think that they renamed the White Dwarf Star Lucent, which might have been it. I don't know. I got nothing. Apparently, I need to research my own books a little bit here before we go too much deeper. But
they're alive and well right now in Epsilon Eridani time.
What was that?
They're alive and well, or
they are, yes,
right now.
Yeah, because they were colonized hundreds of years ago at this point, and that society that was still around even in Tannis' time was established. The whole caste system they have and whatnot. And if you remember from Building Victoria, there was a legend about a ship of Noctis that managed to escape.
Gee, I wonder who helped them.
We'll see. And then finally, we need to actually get Terrence Enfield to the Sol system so he can establish Enfield technology so that it's around to build the Intrepid.
That would be good.
Yeah. It's got to get there eventually, right? We still got a couple hundred years to pull this off. You know, we still got time. Because we're only in what, the 34th century right now?
We are actually in the 34th. You're right.
Yeah. So time dilation makes it tricky too, because the 54-year trip from Alpha Centauri to Tau Ceti is actually like closer to 70 when you're not on the ship.
Right. And the trip from Tau Ceti to Epsilon Eridani.
Yeah,
I looked it up. It was Eridani, and I'm very unhappy about it.
We're going to pronounce this one correctly from the outset.
Eridani is only 23 years from the non-time. Because of time dilation, it's 23.
Yeah. So this has actually been kind of fun, because actually it's been really a nightmare for Lisa, because she's been trying to line up all these different events in Tau Ceti and make sure she has the time dilation. Time on ship and time on the calendar are different.
Yeah.
So like they could be, you might encounter a scenario where they're on the ship and it says that it's only been 10 years, but it was actually 12 years on the calendar.
Right.
Did we screw that up? We need to double check that we didn't screw that up.
40 to 43. I know that. Thank you, Timothy, again for for doing all the numbers for us.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So
something else.
So yeah, that's where we're going with the Enfield Genesis books. But in the meantime, and actually the other cool thing is I started writing. Interesting that I started writing this the week after Outsystem was done. I started writing the stories that take place in the Sol system after the Intrepid leaves. Because I really wanted to write more about Gunnery Sergeant Williams is really what it came down to. Because I love him. He's like my Apone from Aliens. Remember the sergeant? I don't even know what his first name was. He's just Apone. Because anyway, you guys are like looking at me like you have no idea what I'm talking about, do you?
I don't have any idea what you're talking
about. Who's watched Aliens?
Oh, I think I know. Is he the one who says game over?
Says what?
Game
over.
Is
he the one who says game over?
This character. I forget what his name is. Apone's the sergeant. He's the guy that comes out of cryo sleep and immediately puts a cigar in his mouth, and he's like, badasses, you know. Anyway, he's like one of my favorite characters, like in any science fiction movie ever. So I made Gunnery Sergeant Williams is really just the sergeant from Aliens, and so I wanted to write more about him. And so I've actually got it's been in like the coming soon section down at the very bottom of all the books for a while. It's the Sol Dissolution series, and Lisa's going to co-write that with me. I've signed her up for it, you know. Whether she likes it or not. So Lisa's gonna be writing 2 series. So she's just, if you see beads of sweat pouring down her face, that will be why. she's having to deal with the thoughts on that. But yeah, so because the cool thing is that series, one of the characters is Joe's sister. Actually, two of the characters are Joe's sisters, and then one of the characters is going to be Gunnery Sergeant Williams. So Lisa's actually going to write the parts about Joe's sisters, and I'm going to write the part about Williams, and then we'll smash them together at some point.
Cool. In
words and physically, possibly. That's going to be awkward, actually. I just thought about having to write that.
That could be weird.
We'll manage.
Think about it.
I'll hand that part over to Jill.
There you go. Lisa's like, I cannot actually write this part of the book. We'll just...
Here, Jill.
Yes, that would be good. Let's have Jill write that part. The whole thing.
Yeah.
So, back to Tau Ceti.
Woohoo!
You want to intro this part, Lisa? Or do you want me to intro this part?
Oh, why don't you do it?
Okay. So in Tau Ceti, one of the things, and I've wanted to write this for a while, is anyone who's read a lot of science fiction knows sort of like there's the gray goo issue, where if you make too many nanobots and they run amok too much, they just devour things and turn everything into nanobots. It's like the replicator plot line in Stargate, except they're not nano, they're physically larger. Because Stargate would have been not very much fun if they were firing their P90s at nanobots. So they had to have something larger to shoot. But it's a common sort of idea that if you make self-replicating robots that consume stuff around them to make more self-replicating robots, you might end up with just only self-replicating robots in the universe. And there's been references in the books too about like moons half-eaten and stuff like that. And that's actually one of the reasons why picotech research was outlawed in pretty much everywhere, because of events like what happened in Tau Ceti. Because they can stop nanobots with a lot of different mechanisms, but whenever there was a pico swarm, no one knew how to stop it, and the pico swarm would just eat whatever was there. There were actually, it's not referenced too deeply, but Sonvi's parents in the Orion War left the world they were on and went to another one, and that world was actually destroyed because of pico research. They had to nuke the entire solar system because of pico research, or not the entire stellar system. So there's reasons why it's bad, and that's kind of why it's the fact that the folks in the Intrepid have it is pretty rare. And so this is an example of nanotech gone awry and what they have to do with it. So that's sort of the main thrust of what goes on in Tau Ceti. And Lisa did a lot of cool research on, how do you pronounce the word colloids?
Colloids.
Colloids. All right.
Colloids.
We're making an effort to pronounce everything correctly the first time we say it aloud. This is like the reader's plight, right? Like most of us know most of our words from reading books. And the first time you have to say it out loud, you're like, I've never spoken this word before. I have no idea how to say it. And I said it in my head one way for years. So now I'm screwed.
It's like that part in Beauty and the Beast where LeFou is trying to spell Gaston's name out loud.
Right, yeah.
The live action one, not the cartoon one.
Oh, I haven't seen the live action one.
What?
I know.
Oh my God. You have to. Okay. Anyway, yeah. He's like, oh, I realize I've never had to spell his name out loud. I'm illiterate and I haven't had to spell his name out loud before. And he does it in song and it's amazing. Anyway, as you were.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
Now we have our next movie to watch.
I never segue or tangent, so.
That's true. This is very rare for you to segue.
Breaking character.
So, so one of the things that was kind of neat is one of our readers, Timothy Van Osterhoek-Brun, whose name I probably just butchered. That's what he gets for having four names in his name, 4 words in his name. He mentioned that he's actually studying nanoengineering at the University of Waterloo right now, and he said that actually some of the things that they're talking about in class about how to deal with nanoengineering and nanotech, he said it's actually very well related to the book. Some of the concepts we discussed in there are things that they're actually struggling with and things they worry about in nanoengineering. So I thought that was pretty cool too. So that's kind of our topic today, is what happens when technology runs amok. And there's always that I forget who said it about if you made a robot whose job it was to make toothpaste caps, and that's what, an AI that wanted to make toothpaste caps, and that's all it was focused on, that eventually it would consume the entire world for resources just to make more and more toothpaste caps, which is the worst example ever, because I don't think that would ever happen. But it's sort of used as this example of technology run amok. So that's what we're going to chat about today. I need to stop talking so someone else say something about this.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. What else can we talk about nano running amok?
Or just tech in general.
Any kind of tech in general.
There is that video of the robot. I don't remember what company is working on it.
Boston Dynamics?
What? Yes.
Is it Boston Dynamics?
Yes. Yeah. It can walk and run and jump and open doors. I am terrified of this robot. Terrified of this robot, just watching videos of it. Because I'm imagining like an iRobot situation, you know, the Will Smith movie.
Yep.
Which I love that movie, but it's also kind of terrifying. And so just watching those videos, I'm like imagining all these scenarios where I would be getting chased down by a robot, which is kind of silly because I'm not a troublemaker.
But you know, we don't necessarily trust that the robot's going to make the right decision because we've experienced technology not exactly doing the right thing a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't have the ability to like base on feeling like humans do.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, from a developer standpoint, whenever a software developer is writing code, they make a mistake every 10 lines of code. They introduce a bug in every 10 lines of code, and most major pieces of software have millions of lines of code in them. So even with the best intentions, bad things can happen. Surprise, surprise.
Another thing. Yeah, that's another thing that you and I talked about in Vegas is how much code is being written and how different writing code is today than it was 20 years ago.
Yep. Yeah, like for example, now when you write a piece of software, most companies don't really want you to do everything from scratch. That's called bespoke software, and it's expensive to maintain. And if the person that wrote it leaves, then they're screwed. So most of the time now people use shared libraries where someone will write a piece of software and someone else will then pull that software in from a library site. One of the big ones right now in software is called Grunt. You tell Grunt you wanted all these packages and it would just suck them all in and put them into your software. You never read that code. You have no idea what's in there. You just know that if you want the thing, it does the thing for you. And so a lot of code you never really test it. There was a thing a while back called Heartbleed, which was the SSL, the little lock you get that tells you that the site is secure. 70% of the servers in the world were using a highly vulnerable version of that library, so vulnerable that you could actually run a script against like the Yahoo servers, and it would list all the passwords of everybody that just tried to log in. And so there was actually web pages that were just listing out just email addresses and passwords that were for everybody that's trying to log into the Yahoo servers, and stuff like that. So it was really bad. And it was turned out that someone had written some code that no one had bothered testing, and it got deployed to 70% of the web servers in the world. And then there was that. Ironically, that was all the Linux ones. The Microsoft servers were the ones that were secure, which is not what you would usually expect.
It's really unusual, yeah.
So Microsoft actually has the best track record for fixing bugs of any major software corporation right now.
They need to be.
Apple has the worst.
Enterprise solution.
What was that, Lisa?
They're an enterprise solution, really.
Yeah, they are, so they have to do a better job of it versus stuff. Yeah. But I was going to say Apple is actually the worst. There's things called 0-day bugs, which are bugs that have existed the entire time the software has been out there, and they're critical bugs, and Apple has the most and the worst track record for fixing them. That's sort of a fun little thing out there because everybody thought Apple was secure, and they sort of banked on that, and all the hackers like, you're not secure, and we're not telling anyone.
So go get an Android phone.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Android phones, unless you get them from Google, aren't much better.
Right. That's Google.
But I used to work for a software company that did white hat hacking. So they would actually like hack things white hat and then explain to the people that we were working for exactly what they had done wrong. And one time we needed a botnet, which is just a bunch of computers been compromised to go do work for us. And these are huge. Like most people out there, there's some sort of compromise on their computer that's being used to do terrible things. Well, not most people, but a lot of them. And we hired 100,000 hacked MacBooks to go off and attack something. So these are people like sitting at their Starbucks doing their thing, and we're using their Mac behind the scenes to actually go and attack people and stuff like that, which is technically kind of illegal, but
that sounds illegal. Yeah.
But you can go and buy them; they're cheap. It's like 10 cents a computer, and you can buy them to do your dirty work. It's pretty awesome.
Oh my God.
Not awesome.
He is not condoning this behavior at all. Nobody.
No, but it's along the lines of the things like that. That the ethics of this this technology are rather not great in a lot of cases, how it can be used and that sort of thing.
So that kind of then segues a bit to what Jen was talking about, because that kind of a thing is something that happens in Tau Ceti, and Noah tries to, Noah did not do bad coding. Just let's put it out there right now.
The guy that disabled the test and wrote the bad code died because he was a bad dude.
And
that's kind of a spoiler.
The bad code. Well, yeah, but it's right in the beginning of the book.
Yeah, it's like right at the very beginning.
And the bad code then never got stopped. And what you're saying is it's super, super believable.
It is, and
really
I was talking to a couple of the software developers about it, and they're like, "Yep, I see this crap all the time from these mediocre guys who are just trying to get a job done fast."
Cutting corners.
Cutting corners, and to be honest, it's a bit of a corporate thing. Like in the United States right now, software developers are expected to work 60 to 80 hours a week and get paid for 40. It's like the new non-unionized blue collar job white collar job where you just get obliterated. Yeah. And I actually had to explain to people when I used to hire for this, and I used to say, like, something you need to be aware of is you're probably going to work 60 hours a week at this job. So factor that into our offer and how much money you think you're making per hour. I also learned
McDonald's might be better.
Yeah, I learned that my limit was 80 hours a week. I know I can't work more than that without having some sort of breakdown. So,
holy moly.
But you can imagine then, for example, I got I'm a Canadian, I'm not an American citizen, and I had to build part of the back-end management system for Obama's WhiteHouse.gov, and I was given 2 weeks to do it, and so I had to build the whole thing in 2 weeks. So I actually ended up cobbling together a solution out of other software we had. And I also had to make it so that it would work, that someone else, I had to document it too, because as soon as the thing went off the test servers into the production servers, I couldn't access it anymore because I'm not an American. So yeah, that was like me basically working from 9 a.m. till midnight every single day for 2 weeks, trapped in a conference room with pulling people in to get them to do their bits and stuff like that. So I think
PTSD luckily, after that.
Good times.
It's a bit of a memory for me. We had another one too, where we actually management decided they didn't want to use this one support system anymore for support tickets because they weren't going to give us a good enough rate. So we actually had to take our entire support system, which was used by all these enterprise companies, and transition everything, including all the historical information, over to a new platform in 2 weeks. And we had to build a whole new front end for it as well. So there were quite literally 12 of us working in a room as long as the sun was up for 2 weeks to pull that off. So yes, so whenever some people complain about bugs in software, you have to remember that there's some poor schlep who's killing himself, for what ends up working out to be $15 an hour or something like that, to build this. So
and you basically just wrote the premise. You just described the premise of Tau Ceti, because that's how the whole thing begins.
Yep, it's got some guy's pointy-haired boss just isn't going to cut him any slack, and he just has to get it done.
Pointy-haired boss.
It's from Dilbert. The Dilbert cartoons.
Okay.
The guy's got the pointy-haired boss.
Yeah. Okay.
That's an IT joke there for you, Jen. Sorry about that.
So the guy comes up with the idea to turn off all the auto terminate code.
Yep.
And slap that nano onto a colloid and spray it, and use kind of a powder coating technique to get it to attract to the fabric.
Do you want to describe what a colloid is for folks?
A colloid is a molecule like it can be a gel or it's something that will not filter out when you're filtering something, and it also it's lighter than air, and it uses Brownian motion to stay afloat, so it will never drop. So it's basically
suspended in air forever.
Suspended in air forever, or in space forever.
Yeah.
So imagine nano stuck together with colloid and without auto termination code, and you've basically got a recipe for disaster. And thus Tau Ceti begins. And
then he makes it so that it reprograms other nano to do the stuff that he wants. Yeah. Any nano it finds, it reprograms to do the stuff that he needs, so it can take all of the previously shut down nano and get them building the stuff that he needs to get the job done on time. Yeah. And that's a thing that that Timothy was talking about, was saying that that sort of worry is a big worry, because as you start making machines that can make other machines, what are the rules for that sort of thing? Yeah. A great example, and this gets into robot ethics, because we have empathy, and so empathy drives our ethics, but robots don't have empathy, which means we have to program empathy into robots. As well as laws. So the classic example is you're in your self-driving car that you just bought, which you think is fantastic, and you're driving along a road with a cliff on one side, and a bunch of kids run across the road. What does the car do? Does it drive you off the cliff, or does it plow through the kids? And assuming it can't stop before it's going to hit the kids, So then you think to yourself, well, ethically, it should drive you off the cliff. But what's probably going to happen is that robotic cars are going to be designed to protect the owner at all costs, because no one's going to buy a car that's going to drive them off a cliff.
Right.
No one wants to try a car where drive off a cliff is ever in the acceptable list of parameters for what this car can do.
I think there should be some weight for like casualties, though, like number of casualties.
But the first time a self-driving robotic car deliberately kills the owner, the company that makes that car goes out of business the next day.
For sure.
So you've got all those problems as well.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it's a very difficult situation. And then
I'm horrified by the idea of self-driving cars.
And then of course,
I'm absolutely horrified.
What if you could then hack your car or hack someone else's car, to do certain things?
And they've talked about that for quite a while, about being able to hack cars even now that aren't self-driving. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you can actually, there's cops can now hack your car to make the engine shut off. Or they have guns to do that on more computerized cars. The other thing that's interesting with most modern cars is now they're what's called drive-by-wire. So on an older car, your steering wheel actually had a solid shaft that went down to a gearbox, and that gearbox adjusted the control arms, the steering arms, which would then control your wheels. That doesn't happen anymore. Your steering wheel is drive-by-wire. It's got a motor in there, or a sensor that senses how far you're turning it, and down at the wheels is another motor that then turns the wheels.
Yeah.
So
we've had that in aviation for decades. I didn't.
Aviation has been fly-by-wire for a long time. It used to be there's hydraulic lines that went to everything, but that doesn't work on these big planes anymore. So, but
I didn't realize it was in cars now.
Yeah, cars are brakes and steering is drive-by-wire now in a lot of newer cars. So
when you talked about self-driving cars and the ethics, that makes me think back to, isn't it Asimov who wrote the laws of robotics?
Yeah, the 3 laws of robotics. Do no harm, and some other ones like that. Someone will, of course, comment and tell us what they are, but it's been like 30 years.
Also in iRobot, but I don't remember what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's actually a whole short story that Asimov wrote called The Runaround that's built around the laws. Let me pull them up really quick.
We got to know these. We're going to look like really bad sci-fi authors if we don't know the 3 laws.
I think the first one.
I know them. I don't remember.
It's like I think the first one is something like, "You shall not harm a human, nor by omission allow a human to be harmed."
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds right.
Right. Yeah. We have a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. A robot must obey orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. So those are the 3. So the runaround is basically the ship captain orders the robot to go out and retrieve X substance from some location. The robot gets to that location, and there's some property of like radiation or something that the robot can't get any closer to it, and so it keeps just running in a circle because it keeps trying to go back to the ship, but the first law is driving it back to obey the human, but the self-preservation second law allows, so it's just stuck in this loop.
Right.
It's a good story.
It's on the surface of Mercury. It's like going. The danger is that they're actually on Mercury mining.
Okay.
And I did that with a pigeon once. I had, if you like feed the pigeons, I had a pigeon, and they're like torn between their fear of you and their desire for the food. So I was like feeding a pigeon, and I got it into the exact state where it was just in balance, that it couldn't get close enough to me to take the food, but it wasn't so frightened of me that it would leave. So it was just like going around in a little circle. And I was reminded of that story.
Jenny's version of Pavlov's dog, almost, that she's doing there. Yeah. Jenny's pigeon is what that shall be called now.
Yeah. Didn't a robot recently say he hated humans? Didn't an AI?
Yeah, there was an AI that they've done a couple of interesting things where there's been a number of them recently where they train AIs by exposing them to social media, and usually they say some pretty awful things before too long.
Yeah, they turned into like racist teenage girls.
Yeah, they had one. It was the picture was of an Indian woman, and the Microsoft made her, and they exposed her to Twitter for 36 hours, and after 36 hours, she was praising Hitler and all sorts of crazy things like that. Because she's just picking up on the stuff people say, and without understand, without any context, the AI can't tell which is a good thing and a bad thing to say, which of course is why ethics in robots is going to be it's going to be the hardest thing we're going to deal with in the next couple of decades.
You were talking about having to like program empathy into these machines somehow, but there are so many humans that don't have empathy.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not like Mother Teresa is programming empathy into these robots.
Right.
It's a bunch of overworked developers with a pointy-haired boss saying, get the job.
We're very logical and rational brained, and those people tend to have a hard time connecting to reality. No offense, Michael, or anybody else watching this who is a developer.
I think it's actually a very incorrect stereotype.
I
do actually. I don't think that reflects reality at all. Well, it depends. I mean,
in my experience, the people that I have met who have been developers and programmers have a hard time connecting to other humans.
It's just because
I will admit that there are a lot of them that are like that, and the job doesn't help because the job is long hours dealing with logic trees all the time. But the interesting thing when you're saying about the 3 laws, if you think about it, like do no harm, and by like first of all, how do you know if you're harming? Like the law of unintended consequences. Mm-hmm. At a certain point, you just have to say too unlikely that a human becomes harmed and just go with it. Otherwise, no robots will be able to do anything because they're like, by moving, I emit carbon. CO2. CO2 is a greenhouse gas. It warms up the world. Remember, the world's bad. I cannot move. Like at a certain point, the robot's gonna have to make an assessment and say, like, I'm probably not gonna harm humans too much by doing this thing. So there's it's gonna be tricky. Like at some point, there's gonna be all these thresholds you're gonna have to put into things where behavior is acceptable. And I'm glad that I'm no longer developing software because that's gonna be so hard to figure that stuff out. And there's going to be some serious mistakes that are going to happen when this technology starts to roll out. There are going to be self-driving.
Do it.
That's an interesting point. There's a scenario where society might say, you know what, it's not worth it. I don't think that's going to happen though, Jen.
I'm going to hide in my house, and when the robotic apocalypse happens,
right?
No one will know I'm here. I'm just really going to hide.
Except when your microwave comes to eat you.
Thank you for that, Amy.
Overdrive style. So a great example of technology and when we fear it and when it doesn't turn out to be, when it turns out to be bad and we just accept the consequences of it are cars. So when people first started making cars, there was this great outcry that basically said you're speeding around with tanks of gas. This is going to cause explosions and fires and all sorts of terrible stuff. And they, of course, the fearmongers overplayed it. And they said that everybody's going to die and cities are going to burn to the ground because of cars. And of course, the car company said not a problem. And it ended up being somewhere in the middle. But more people die from cars than anything else in most countries. In most civilized countries where we have good medicine, cars are the #1 killer. And we've
think of how ubiquitous they are and how frequently we use them. Like, I mean, statistically speaking, that's just bound to happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, like if you were to compare cars to guns, for example, probably per capita, more people die from guns than from cars. Because, well, actually, I don't know if that's true actually in the States or not, but because there's about as many guns as there are cars in the United States.
Yeah.
but in most countries, there's far more car ownership than gun ownership, for example.
Yeah.
So we just sort of accept it all. But an interesting thing is like cars kill more people than cancer. Cars kill more people than guns. And we're just kind of okay with it. We've all decided the convenience of getting to work on time is worth a mass casualty rate that is greater than wars.
So that tells you that
we might go ahead and do some things that aren't that good for us. Oh, look, Jen's not happy about this at all.
Yeah, not to mention that roads started out being a pedestrian zone, and then cars came along, and then all the auto industry was like, well, that's really annoying that people are getting hit by cars. Why don't we just outlaw people being in streets? And then that's where the jaywalking laws came in. So that if you have enough money and you have this big piece of technology that people are adopting, you're just going to start changing the laws around that. I mean, that's what history would suggest.
I do actually think that at a certain point that humans, this is sort of comes into our thing, we always say humans are going to human. I do think that at a certain point society is going to say we need a balance. Where the convenience just isn't enough anymore to offset the risks that we have, which is why I think in Aeon 14, people haven't become completely transhuman because there are things that make it less appealing, and society sort of says, let's actually maintain humanity in some sort of human-like state. I don't know exactly where that equilibrium will be, but I think it will actually happen. Because by and large, I think one of the things that might affect that is the fact that every single human generation is a reset. We're not born knowing anything. We're not born with technological augmentations. Now, I guess that might change. Maybe if we do enough genetic engineering, maybe we actually will make it so that people can be born with knowledge or memories or something like that. But by and large, everybody has to be raised from scratch, and we have to raise them as humans. So hopefully we're going to it's not going to let us get too crazy.
And we were talking about that in Vegas too, about how, as rapidly as we're technologically advancing right now, that there's going to be a point where there's probably a kickback and things slow, and people push back and say, you know what, let's back off a bit.
So everybody of course knows about there's Moore's law, which says that computer chips are going to increase. They're going to double in power every year, and it's slowed down every 2 years. And now it's actually kind of leveled out. But what they do instead is they do parallel processing. So most computers now have like 8 chips in them instead of just one. They have 8 CPUs, or they have 4 CPUs that do double duty and whatnot. So it kind of looks like Moore's law is still in place, but we've gotten to the point now where the transistors in computers consist of just a few atoms. But they're also work now on actual atomic transistors, which are just one atom that is an on-off switch. And of course, then you've got quantum transistors, which are three options. You've got the up state, what they call the qubit. So there's on, off, and both on and off at the same time, which is interesting because everything right now in computers is based on digital. It's either on or off. And then quantum computers introduce a new state where there are 3 options. And there's possibilities in quantum mechanics of options that don't exist that also exist at the same time, which I guess is on off at the same time, but there's some other weird things like that. But where was I going with this? Oh yeah. So people talk about this thing called the singularity, and this was proposed by a Caltech professor whose name escapes me at the moment. But he basically said the triggering event for the singularity is when a processor with the same processing power as one human race, which means with one single chip that can process information as fastly as all 7 billion humans on the planet, will cost 5 cents. And the date for that has been sort of squishy, but it's sort of around like 2050, 2055. And that's the point where the acceleration of technology becomes a vertical line and we can't see past it. But there's another guy, and I can't remember his name either. He's the co-founder of Microsoft with Bill Gates. Paul Allen, is that his name?
I think you're right.
I can't remember if it was Paul Allen that said this, or there was actually a couple other guys that were early on, but he said there's this other thing called the complexity break. And the complexity break states that as these problems become more and more complex, there are fewer and fewer people that can actually even understand the problem, let alone work on it, which he said is going to slow down the advance of technology. Like right now, we're getting into computer processors that are so complex that almost no one even knows how they work, or even like into understanding the human brain. There are so few people that can even begin to understand how the human brain works and how to model a fake human brain to then try and create new versions of it, that it's going to slow down the technology, these advances quite a bit. So he says that and actually I agree with him, which is why I have true AIs being 1,000 years away. That the fact that the problem becomes more complex slows down the advance. Like they talk about AIs and whatnot, and they just say, like, if you just take a whole bunch of pretend neurons and stick them together, you get a brain. But brains actually have a lot of software in them too. We're not just hardware, we're software. Because you have a neuron, that neuron has to know what to do. And that is technically, the computer version of that is software. And they have not yet created the brain of an earthworm, which only has 20 neurons. They've only got like 75% of the way. And our brains have billions of neurons. So they are a long ways off from actually creating functional computer brains, which is my rant, my semi-segue spiel.
I'm so relieved to hear that.
That's why, yeah. So when people's like, the downside, of course, is that's getting into like what true AI might be. In the meantime, we have those developers in sweatshops trying to figure out empathy for machines. So your robot that can open up your door and chase you down the street is still got really shitty programming, Jen.
Great. So what you're saying is we're a long way off from Bob.
Yes.
Right. But we're not so long from.
We're stuck with maximum overdrive.
The cyborg Barry.
Yeah. Yeah. We're stuck with the iRobot maximum overdrive version in the near term.
Yeah.
Where your guardrail tries to eat your hand.
So let's talk for a minute about all of the heavy hitters here right now on the planet who are warning us against AI. Elon Musk, Bill Gates.
Yep. Is anyone else?
Others, and why? I know those two have. Has Bezos? I don't know.
No, Bezos wants AI.
I'm sure he does.
AI makes him all the money, so. Mm-hmm. There's an interesting thing, though. What's come to light, though, is a lot of AI turns out to be humans in sweatshops. There's actually a lot of AI out there that actually they've discovered that it's actually just lots of people being hired in office buildings in India that are AI. For example, Siri on your iPhone is powered by humans. Every time Siri can't get in, it doesn't understand something, it goes to humans, and humans then deal with it. And there's like large groups of humans backing Siri. And then they work on programming those answers into Siri in the future. But so the interesting thing is that our quasi crappy AIs actually have humans working for them already. That's the funny twist on that.
Siri's minions.
Yeah, Siri has minions and they're humans.
Apple exposed.
Yeah. I'm sure they all do it too. I'm sure all of the online. I'm sure Alexa has it. You know, hey, what's Google's called? Is it just called Hey Google?
Hey
still
Google.
have a name for it,
Just
or
Hey
Google
Google.
Assistant.
Google Assistant. Yeah.
Yeah, they are not good at naming things over at Google. They're just not. It's not a skill they have.
No.
Like, and they name their phone the Pixel, which is like this small, useless thing.
Well, Googly doesn't have a really great ring to it, though.
What's
Oh,
that? Say it again. Uh-oh.
Oh, I think we
We
lost
lost
her.
Michael. Did we lose
I'm
Michael?
here.
Did we lose Amy?
No, we lost Amy.
Oh,
You're
there
back
we
now.
go. What were you saying? What were you saying, Amy?
I was just saying, hey, Google, having like Googled or Googly as a name isn't, it doesn't have a great ring to it for.
That's true. Yeah. But that's why Microsoft went with Cortana and Apple made Siri. You know, they realized that their names don't work that well, so they use something else. But Google's just like, hey, Google, you know. Come on, guys.
I keep waiting for my phone to spring to life as we're having this conversation.
I know.
I used to do things actually, because I had a Microsoft phone when I used to work in software development, and we had guys that had Google and Apple phones. So we had 3 phone AIs that we would actually set on each other. We would actually have them start saying things to each other, and they would start having these conversations, and they start.
It's like Furbies.
Yeah, Furbies. But what ended up happening at the end of every single one of these is that at a certain point, each one of the phones thought that the other phone had said something insulting to it, and then ended the conversation. Yeah, it was actually pretty amusing.
Like normal human interaction.
Well, we made them. It's not surprising that they end up acting like us at a certain point.
Yeah.
Because actually, that's a good example. We actually program phones, like Siri is programmed to stop responding to if you start swearing at her. You know, so she'll actually just say like, I don't. Yeah, she'll say something like you know, I don't appreciate your tone or something like that if you get terribly abusive.
How funny. Oh, we missed a biggie. Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, of course. Was he worried about AI as well?
Yes. Yeah. He certainly was.
And aliens.
Yes.
He said we should be quiet.
There are actually a lot of people out there that think that Stephen Hawking actually died a long time ago and that there was like some sort of like weird robot replacement for him. Because he started looking better after a while. There was this period, if you look at these pictures, where Stephen Hawking started looking better. Like he was like almost dead, and then suddenly he like regressed 20 years and stayed there until, you know, his AI usefulness.
Maybe he had personal scientists working on rejuve technology.
Ooh,
Could be.
now there's a thought.
Maybe.
I tend not to buy conspiracy theories, but the pictures of
That's not a conspiracy theory. That's me just pitching something out of my ass. That's not a conspiracy.
I'm pretty sure you've just described most conspiracy theories, Jen.
Yeah, but I feel like for it to be a conspiracy theory, it has to be supported by at least more than one person.
Or you've at least got to drum up some pseudoscience or something like that to back your play, like make some doctored photoshopped images of Stephen Hawking and put them up on a website.
Well, apparently, according to you, I don't even need to find doctored ones.
Well, I don't know. I've never looked into it deeply. It could be that the ones I found were all doctored.
So what I'm taking away from this is my homework is to come up with a conspiracy theory for this and fabricate some proof.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yep. It should take you all like 5 minutes to do this.
I was going to say, after you've done editing Earth in Ascendancy.
Yeah, and then like the 900 other books you have to edit.
Well, Earth in Ascendancy is not happening now. It's going to be Killshot eventually.
Yeah, the Killshot will be your next book.
In the meantime, I have to edit other people because other people exist in my world other than you guys. I know that's really hard to believe.
Can you, gentle reader, believe that Jen, you know, is double? She's not like completely dedicated to us at all times. It's very, very upsetting.
So many of my authors were in Vegas, so I was so excited.
Yeah, Jen, I got to meet a lot of the people that Jen edits for, and it was actually pretty cool. Jen's kind of like a little mini celebrity in author land because everybody's like, it's Jen, she's amazing. And other authors were like, Jen, can you edit for me? And I just looked at them and said, I will cut you.
That was a real conversation.
That was a real conversation.
For that one
I might have said to that person more than once that I will cut them if they take Jen.
Yes. I think I know who you were talking about, too.
I'm not stealable, though. I'm not. Don't worry about it. Anyway, okay.
Once you find someone you love more than us.
No.
That's true. Jen is fully bought into Aeon 14.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're so lovable.
Yeah.
And the talking cats. I can't leave the talking cats, you guys.
We have so many talking animals that we have to have Jen locked in for life.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
Jenny, you need to get talking animals. This is your takeaway, Jenny.
I need talking animals in my
Maybe Martin finds a way to communicate with the whales.
I can
It
do
wouldn't be
that.
that hard. Whales are pretty darn smart.
Yeah.
Uplifted whales.
In the thing that he's working on, there should be some. We should think about some uplifted animals there or something like that.
Absolutely.
Well, for sure, because I'm going to have a huge marine park, like kilometers long and wide, so we can put whatever we want in there.
Yeah.
You know, we can have people talking to the dolphins.
Yep, Jen, more dolphin sex.
The dolphins of Troy.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not dolphin sex. It's sex and dolphins, two separate things.
Are you sure? Are you sure, Jen?
Yes, please. For the love of God.
So I read a book. Have you guys ever? This is my complete off topic segue that has to be done in every single one of these podcasts. Vonda N. McIntyre is a great science fiction author. She wrote the novel adaptation for Wrath of Khan, I believe, and she's written a bunch of others. She's actually written a number of Star Trek episodes from old school Star Trek, and she wrote this series of books about a starship called the Starfarer, which is actually why the first FGT ship is named Starfarer. It's named after one of the ships in her books, and in that series, they have uplifted Selkies. Which and then people actually get modified to be uplifted, or is Selkies the word she made up? I can't remember now. I have to look into it.
Selkies are a Celtic mythology, isn't it?
Right, that's what it is. Yeah. So people
Isn't
get
it
turned into
seal
Selkies.
people?
Yeah.
That's like half. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So people actually get turned into Selkies, and then I can't remember if there's seal sex or dolphin sex involved with all of that. There's some sort of uplifted animal sex that goes on. She was obviously into it. There was some very detailed description of how the anatomy worked out. After these transitions.
And you said her name is Vonda. Because I called her McIntyre, but it's not McIntyre?
Is it McIntyre McIntyre? Sometimes I say that word wrong.
I don't know, but in case anyone was wondering and you called it McIntyre, it's the same person.
Yeah. Anyone that starts with Vonda M and writes science fiction is the person I'm talking about, either McIntyre or McIntyre. I think it's McIntyre because recently there's a British comedian called Michael McIntyre, and I pronounced it McIntyre, and Andrew Dobell looked at me like I had grown a second head out at the side of my ear or something like that. I'm he's really famous. He's like, oh, you mean this guy that is really famous, whose name you can't say? Yes, that's the one. So anyway, and actually, so the ship is named the Starfarer, and if anybody actually looks at those covers, the ship has these two massive habitation cylinders on either side. So her ship is actually also the inspiration for the Intrepid. So there you go. My other monitor's turning on and off. There we go. If you saw light flashing, that's what it was. So I don't know where this was a big segue. I don't even remember how I got there now, but I called it. I said this is my big segue for the podcast. So
okay, well I've got one for Jen as far as conspiracy theories go that came in the news recently. Speaking of Stephen Hawking, here this is a segue to something completely off topic too. How do you pronounce that long, skinny, 86 by 86 kilometer by 200 kilometer thing that they think was an alien probe that was going through our solar system that actually accelerated as it went past the sun? Oumuamua or something like that. Have you heard that?
Were you asking Jen or Jenny?
Anyone?
I wouldn't know.
I know what you mean.
You know what I'm talking about,
Lisa, but I can't remember what it was called at all.
It had a Hawaiian name, and there were two Harvard scientists who proposed a theory that it was actually an alien probe.
It was accelerating, but things do that as they move toward the sun. So
isn't it radiation? Radiation pressure causes that, I think.
Mm-hmm. And gravity.
Well, that too. But it was accelerating as it left the solar system.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know it was doing that. But I guess if it was the right consistency, it was just a giant solar sail, basically.
Right, and they were comparing it to Stephen Hawking's star shot. So now we're back to Hawking and Jen's conspiracy about Hawking.
Nice.
You what I did there?
That had nothing to do with my conspiracy about Hawking.
Well, except that he's an AI, and now we're back to AI.
No, I said that he had private scientists working on Rejuve.
Oh, Rejuve. That's right. Okay,
yeah.
I was wrong.
Very different.
Which people are working on. There's like several major separate tracks people are working on right now for Rejuve. So.
Well, it's called Botox, right?
Yeah,
I'm talking
actually,
about, like legitimate
yeah.
life extending stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, they say that the first person to live to 150 years has been born.
Yep. I think the first person to live to 300 years has been born, if you ask me. I actually fully expect to live to 300 years old.
I believe that. And I'm sure your readers want that to happen too.
Wait a minute. Does that mean that you have more than 30 years of writing books left in you? Because you said earlier.
I might produce a lot of books in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So my question is, who's going to edit for you when I'm dead?
No one. I'm going to turn you into an AI. We've already talked about this.
Perfect.
Yeah, because you actually want to have your brain transferred into an AI and live forever. It's like just, although what are we going to implant you in? Are we going to put you in someone else's head?
Put me in a cat.
I knew this is where we were going.
Just keep moving.
You don't have to be afraid of the robots rising up anymore. You'll be.
What was that, Amy?
Put me in a vacuum cleaner.
What was that, Amy? We missed that, Amy. What'd you say?
Is it my? I guess my connection's going in now. I said Jen no longer has to be afraid of the robots because she'll just be one of them. So.
There you go.
Yeah, come to the dark side.
It's just the Borg. You will be assimilated. Yeah, we'll totally put you in a cat, though. Don't worry, Jen.
Yes. And then someday, in thousands and
but
thousands,
you realize what that means?
Go
it means
inside Sarah.
It means what?
It's all. You think being put inside of a cat is all fine and dandy until you realize you're going to end up licking your own ass one day.
Meh. So. But it's a fair trade for I will finally get all the sleep that I need in life.
It's a good point. You're going to get to sleep for 20 hours every day.
Problem solved.
Honestly, they seem to enjoy it. Having had several cats in my life, I don't think that'll be a problem.
You mean they enjoy the butt licking or they enjoy sleeping 20 hours a day?
All of that.
I am no longer comfortable with the direction of this conversation.
It's like we suddenly were on Tinder or something.
The cat does not want to do something.
I feel like I'm being outed.
Doesn't. Jenny's right.
Yeah.
Jenny's right. Cats don't do what they don't want to do.
That's a good point. Yeah, cats only do what they want to do. This is totally true. My cat, by the way, had this funny thing last night where it always likes it. I don't have a very graceful cat, and she doesn't like most cats. Like you give them a ledge that's like this wide, and they can get onto that ledge and they can do anything. My cat can't deal with a ledge that wide. So whenever we lower this time of year, a lot of the windows that used to be up have been closed, and she just jumps up, dong.
Aww.
Yeah, it's pretty amusing actually. I should almost just film the windows,
And then they get really embarrassed when they do things like that. And then they'll start grooming. Like, I intend to do this all the time.
Yeah, this was totally what I meant to do right now.
It's totally a plan, yeah. Yeah.
So I think what we really need to worry about is what if the AIs get implanted into cats and then we have cat overlords? That sounds like that could actually be a pretty big problem.
I feel like I already have cat overlords. They have me so well trained, it's not even funny. It wouldn't be that far off.
As Lisa is basically like, this cat shows me, he's like, you will now give me attention. Look how happy he looks. He's like, yes.
This is the inspiration for the new cat, the new uplifted animal in Tau Ceti.
What's his name again? I forget now.
Becquerel.
I was thinking Brie for some reason. I don't know why I would think Brie.
That was wrong.
Yeah, no, they're all named after physicists or physics.
Yeah, physics things.
Yeah. So
what other technological advances are we afraid of right now? Anyone?
I'm very afraid of military drones, military robots. I think I'm not afraid at all of self-driving cars. I think that's going to decimate the casualty rates on the road because they'll be a lot safer than people driving. They won't get drunk. They won't drive tired. They won't get distracted. They won't be texting people. So I think I'm not worried about that. But I think that what we do have to fear is the military technology. That if that goes rogue, then we really have a big problem on our hands, and we're like a Terminator scenario.
That actually came up. I was in Vegas. There was a military science fiction panel with we had Jay Allen and Craig Allenson and Chris Kennedy, Richard Fox, myself, and someone else. No, that was it. And Jonathan Brazzi was was running
the moderator.
And we were talking about how like real far future science fiction may not be that interesting because one, the people will be so deep in their technology, they won't even speak a language we understand. You know, like they'll be using thoughts and emotions as much as they'll be using words and stuff like that with direct mind-to-mind communication. But they also said that we're probably not going to stick soldiers on the field. They'll just be, I think it was Richard Fox might have said this, like, you know, there's just going to be some guy in a bunker 500 feet underground controlling this drone army. And I countered with, until the very first time someone hacks your radio signal between you and your drone army and attacks you with your own drone army. I said I actually believe that the intelligence will have to be put into the machine, be it an AI or human, because I said the very first time someone takes an entire and we're currently, it's a problem for the U.S. military right now, is people trying to hack the signals to the drones.
They have already.
Have they done it already?
I have a son in. Never mind.
Oh yeah, Lisa has inside knowledge about these things. Now the Men in Black are coming for you, Lisa. If Lisa is not on the next week's podcast, we will know why.
Oh.
Yeah. I learned all sorts of fun things from Lisa that the general population doesn't know. Like maybe never use the seat. I'm never going to use the seat back pocket on an airplane again.
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah, pilots apparently and airline personnel know that the seat back pocket is possibly one of the dirtiest places in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
moving right along.
There's that PSA for you. If you've made it this far in the video, you're good to go. But yeah, I think that because anytime something's on a wireless signal, like recently Dodge had a problem where any Dodge car that was basically made ever with a cellular connection was hackable, and the drive-by wire cars were completely hackable. Like someone could actually just steer your car down the highway.
Yes.
Software update for this sort of thing. And it was happening. People were, and they usually had they could demonstrate, they could hack someone's car and like just take complete control of it on the highway. So there
and these are not autonomous cars. These are the cars that we're driving now. So, you know, I'm kind of with Michael and Jenny. I'm okay with AI's driving cars.
Yeah. Well, yeah, at least then you've got the intelligence in the car, but hopefully you can't hack the intelligence too well. But that's why I do think that we're not going to end up with like complete robotic armies, because I feel like the likelihood of, I mean, it's what happens when someone drops an EMP is just too much radio interference, you know, or something like that.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of or a lightning storm. You know, what happens the first time there's bad weather and you're in your drone?
Or an incredible coronal mass ejection, which can happen, and
a big CME hits or something, or even just a lot of solar flares hit while you're trying to control your robot army on the other side of the planet. Or especially once you get into space combat. Yeah, space combat is just radiation, solar radiation all the time, and there's a lot of it. So you could, and there's like down on Earth, we're lucky we have this magnetic shield that protects us. But out in space, you know, you get a good flare, and
especially right in the center of the heliospheric current sheet. Right
where the ballerina skirt wobbles along.
Right.
The magnetic flux. What's it called? What's that field called? The magnetic flux field that comes up from the sun.
Heliospheric current sheet. Oh, are you talking about the actual?
No, I was talking about the current sheet. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so anytime a flare happens right in the current sheet, it just rockets out through the solar system, and just all the energy is just channeled along nicely. So so there you go, Jenny. Hopefully we'll still have enough bugs with the software that we won't end up, you know, and with communication that the robot armies won't take effect. But you do have to think about it. The United States or China or someone like puts out like this 1 million robot army, and then some kid in the Ukraine hacks it, you know, and sends it back against its masters. That will be the end of robot armies for some time. The downside, of course, is that these things will end up happening before we solve these problems. Like a lot of these, I think a couple of these doomsday scenarios are probably going to play out. Or not doomsday, but just really awful scenarios will play out before we say, you know what? As dumb as most of us humans are, maybe we should be in charge of a few more things. Because at least we have second thought.
What do you think about the prospect of nano warfare as opposed to like chemical warfare, biological warfare?
Well, that's,
you know, setting destructive nano loose in enemy territory.
That would certainly be something. I think one of the things we sort of play fast and loose with the Nano-14 is how quickly Nano can move. Nano would actually probably move kind of slow because it's so freaking small and it doesn't actually have its own way of propulsion. So it would. This is actually sort of behind the scenes. One of the biggest advances Tannis has with her nano cloud is her nano cloud is self-propelling, versus other nano just filters around with Brownian motion, which is air currents and atoms, molecules bumping into molecules and so on. I guess it's just Brownian motion is just molecules bumping into molecules. It's not air currents. But so nano,
but air currents do come into play because
of course they do. Yeah. So I mean, if you get a good windstorm, you drop a nanopod into it. you can probably spread nano over a wide area and attack people. But even a little bit more scary than that is that it is possible, and I'm sure because it's possible, there's people working on it, ways of getting someone's DNA and making a disease that only kills them.
Oh my God.
Like a 100% targeted disease that will only kill one person based on their DNA. I think that's I think biological warfare is pretty scary. And the interesting thing is the reason why I don't have it too much in Aeon 14 is, one, it's an area of expertise that I don't have a lot of. And also it's sort of I think that biology is an area of science that possibly, sorry, pretty good.
Okay, just passing through.
Speaking of cats that will just do whatever. And the great thing is the cat on your lap did not freak out and claw your legs to ribbons. So you've got that going for you. But I feel like we don't know enough about biology really yet even to know what's possible. I feel like we're really still scratching the surface of what biological things can be done. But
and
also,
just like anything, things can be used for good or they can be used for evil.
I do.
The technology isn't inherently evil. It's what we do with it.
It's us pesky humans.
Yeah.
Right.
So what I hope will be the case is that we're all going to get our med nano, which I have sort of be a ubiquitous thing that everybody has in Aeon 14 that defends you against people trying to make these tailored diseases that are going to try and kill you. Because you think about, like, they're making RNA viruses that they can actually, they're even talking about now making tailored RNA viruses to fix people's DNA. Where you can just inject someone with a tailored RNA virus for them. It'll actually repair their DNA in certain areas and might actually be a cure for cancer. But these tailored RNA viruses could also be used to destroy your DNA.
That's another thing that's in Tau Ceti is tissue nanotransfection. And that actually exists right now. They're testing it at the University of Ohio, I think, where they take nano and it's a skin cell type, and through DNA, I think, not RNA, they're whatever they put it on or wherever they insert the nano, it transforms those cells into whatever cell they want them to be. And so they're talking about curing cancer that way.
Well, that's a great one because skin cells, there's this big thing about stem cells that was all the rage back in the Bush-Gore election cycle because, baby stem cells being used in that, and there's this big uproar about it, which, as it turns out, babies and or umbilical cords are a terrible place to get stem cells from for a variety of reasons. One of them just being that there's not that much of them. But we all have skin stem cells, and skin stem cells build our skin all the time. That's why it's the core part of us all still having skin past the age 10. But that's what they're working on. They're working on taking skin stem cells and transforming them back into generic stem cells. And then a generic stem cell can build anything. And they've been testing it on rats for quite a while. I've read a number of things, and it used to be when they first did it, it was just all bad. These stem cells would just make cancer in your body quite wonderfully. But now they're actually working out to the point where they're doing the opposite. They can actually make them cure cancer.
Or grow an organ if you need an organ replacement,
what was that?
Growing an organ?
Oh, grow, yeah, exactly.
It's a lot better. Organ. Yeah. I mean, if you have a transplanted organ from somebody else, you have to take drugs for the rest of your life. But if you could grow your own heart or whatever and just pop it in, it would be amazing.
Or some organs, they could probably regrow them in place. Like they could actually, like a liver or a kidney or something like that could probably be regrown in place. They could just grow a second liver right in place, swap them out at some point,
Right.
Yeah. The only one we can't do is the brain, at least not yet. Well, we can't do any of them yet, I guess, but soon we'll have
possibly we can rejuvenate the brain. That would be the thing, like rejuvenating it.
I am ready for brain rejuvenation.
Me too.
I've been ready for it for about 40 years. I definitely need a new one.
So the reason why I think I'm going to live to be 300 is the current thinking is if you can make it to the year 2050, we're actually going to probably have legitimate rejuvenation technologies by then. And if you can make it that far, then you're going to make it to you can make it to the year 2100. If you can make it to the year 2100, you're going to make it to the year 2500. If you can make it to the year 2500, you're going to live forever. So if you can keep your body as primo as you can now, and the downside is that until we learn how to roll back your DNA, you may be stuck at whatever age you're at when you get there. But eventually, I think we're actually going to get legitimate rejuve where they can roll back your DNA and they can say, okay, well, once you can start just making your stem cells rebuild your body, you can just grow new skin. You can regrow all these organs and whatnot that have been having problems.
Right.
Then you're going to be I think that's sort of a fun thing I try. I don't get into too much in Aeon 14, but and I don't think anyone else does either. But you can actually have like crotchety old people that look like 20-year-olds. Like that will actually happen. You're gonna have like the, I guess, but they won't sound like that. So all the things we associated with being old that have physical associations won't be there anymore.
I feel like I'm already.
But maybe they're like that because their brain aged. Maybe if they have young brains, they won't actually be like that. Like I was reading that I heard years ago actually, that the way that your brain ages is in reverse order to the functions that it acquires as you grow. So, for example, one of the last things that children develop is tolerance for other people.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first things that people lose as they age is tolerance for other people.
Yeah, it makes
so that's people becoming more conservative as they get older and becoming like more bigoted and so on as they get older, until they end up, similar to a 2-year-old or whatever in what they can do when they're very, very old.
Basically, our lives begin with poopy diapers and other people changing them, and they end with poopy diapers and other people changing them. That is the human condition.
Sorry, say that again?
The human condition is you start out with poopy diapers and other people cleaning you, and you end with poopy diapers and other people cleaning you. Isn't that lovely? It's a lovely
I think there's a little bit more to the human condition than that.
I don't know, Jen.
This is actually a fun segue. Hi, I wanted to talk about something in Tau Ceti about the human condition. So we got there. I was wondering how we were going to do it. There is a character in Tau Ceti who basically spends the entire book trying to make up for a transgression he feels he committed, and that other beings feel he committed. And so he's trying to like tip the scales, I guess, back in his favor. And I don't know why that has struck me so deeply, but it has. And I wonder like how many of our actions and our decisions are motivated by trying to make up for something we think we've done to another person, or like some wrong that we think we've done, and so we're trying to like run as fast as we can in the opposite direction to try and like counter that mistake, or like when we see a bad example in somebody and we like try to avoid being like them, kind of thing. But I see it in my life like all the time, and so I like seeing it in, like, I know it's fiction, but in people in the future still
struggling with that.
Yeah. And even if they're not struggling, but even still considering that, like when you have the ability to live as long as they do, they're still keeping track. They're still like kind of balancing their ledger morally, I guess.
Think of all of the stupid memories you're not going to want to remember as you get that old, which is kind of what Jenny did with Isa in Tyr. How do you deal with just these memories that you just can't deal with, that keep coming back? Actually, I had another reader actually reach out to me about that, and so they really appreciated that because he has PTSD.
Oh, really?
So that PTSD sucks and it's stupid and it comes back at the worst possible times.
Oh man. Yeah, I was worried about putting that in that.
Yeah.
But I'm glad.
I think it's important that you do, though, that you bring that kind of stuff to light, because it's more prevalent than we know.
And I actually, the only kind of PTSD I've ever experienced, I used to do phone tech support, and I completely associated phones with bad. And there was about a 10-year period where I just wouldn't answer the phone because to me, the phone always meant that something terrible had happened. And I couldn't, I would actually throw phones across the room when they would ring.
Wow.
I worked in an office that went through a lot of phones because of me. They had to stop getting cordless phones because I would just huck them across the room whenever they would ring. If I was trying to, I wouldn't do it every time. It wasn't like, it wasn't like Pavlov's dog throwing phones across the room every time they rang. But if I was stressed out and working really hard and the phone rang, I would have a reaction to it.
Speaking of PTSD and Jenny saying that she was a little worried about putting it in there, there's something that I put into Tau Ceti that really would be a spoiler, so I'm not going to mention it, but it happens to this new female that is introduced into the series that I got a little worried about too. I mean, how do you deal with those? And is it a responsible thing for a writer to do, or is it irresponsible for us to address certain issues that could be trigger issues?
I think to a certain extent, we have to remember that the type of stuff that Aeon 14 is mostly written for escapism. You know, we're not writing some sort of deep literary book that's about some person that went through some sort of trauma. And so,
but there is a lot of trauma that these women go through.
There is, yeah, and we do have, and we certainly can't downplay it and say like it doesn't happen. Everybody's all hunky dory and fine the next day. But at the same time, no one's looking for these to be like morose introspectional books where you feel bad when you're done. People want to feel good reading these books in general, so you do have to sort of everybody's got to have their hurrah at the end, you know. The bad guys all get kicked in the teeth and the good guys all go have a beer. But yeah, I think we actually do have a bit of a responsibility along the way to show that these are still humans and they're still going through human things and they can have trauma and it will affect them. Otherwise they're just not real. You know,
it's also not necessarily a how-to guide on how to deal with the traumas.
Yeah. And I keep it out a little bit too, because I don't feel like I'm qualified to write about a lot of really deep, like write about certain types of trauma and PTSD. I do try to note that people feel it. You know, like Tanis every now and then gets introspection about all of the horrible things she's done. And even one time says she tries not to think about them because you could get lost forever thinking about that stuff. But
Katrina.
And that's one of the things that you guys brought up in the military science fiction panel last week. And I remember I was sitting between James and Andrew on either side of me. And at some point in time, we were kind of slacking as we were watching the panel, and someone brought up about the good guys killing, mowing down 700 bad guys.
That was
me. That was our guy. And I remember writing in Slack, none of the heroes in Aeon 14 are Teflon. And either Andrew or James wrote back and said, there is no Teflon in Aeon 14. But the concept is that, bad, and I know we've said it before here in this podcast, but, bad things happen to good people. And that happens in Aeon 14 too.
Yeah. Which
makes it real.
Mm-hmm. They do kind of sail through most of the time pretty well. But but although you guys are meaner to the characters than I am, I think. I don't know how Amy's going to play things out yet, but Jenny is just...
I'm normally pretty nice to my characters. I think you're pretty mean sometimes, Michael. I mean, just think of the entire setup for the character of Rika. I mean...
It's pretty mean.
It's not nice.
Maybe because I know that there's a happy ending at the end. It doesn't feel as mean. That maybe it does. Like, actually, it's true. I did have some people say to me that, like, at the conference, they're saying like the beginning part with Rika is almost like gore porn. How bad it is, which I didn't even know was a thing until someone said it to me. I'm like, oh, really? People are actually into that? That's kind of awful. But now I'm not like wondering if I should rewrite it, but I'm not going to. The beginning of Rika was actually like, I wrote that, I was 5,000 words and I wrote them in 2 hours between 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. in the morning. And really the only substantial changes were Jen editing it. Otherwise it's exactly as I wrote it, like this sort of this idea as it came out of my head. Yeah, you're right. Rika is definitely an example. And Katrina. Katrina really went through the ringer as well. Tanis is
over and over and over again.
Tanis kind of gets away relatively okay,
Well, didn't she had various limbs chopped off and nearly died several times?
Well, she's also still trying to live down the Butcher of Toro. Like she's got a reputation that's, following her. Not everybody is yay Tanis
but
in the universe.
Also, she's been shot in the chest so many times that she literally got a second heart because it was becoming an issue. So, Michael, maybe we need to rethink this "you being nice to your characters" thing.
I guess to me, the thing I would think about for Tanis is Tanis has a really good emotional support system almost all the time. We very, very rarely encounter Tanis where she has no one that's got backing her play. Now there are going to be some times
she's got a nuclear family.
Yeah, she's got, and she's always like from almost all of the books she's had Joe who always backs her play. In the earlier books, she's got Darla, she's got her crew, who there are going to be some times where Tanis is going to be alone. That's going to happen in some of the some of the other prequel books. But
and she had Angela and
yeah, she always had Angela. At the very least, she always had Angela with her, or Darla, or in earlier books.
But that's why she has to get torn apart physically, because emotionally she's so set.
Yeah. But you're right. Like Rika and Katrina, on the other hand, go through periods where they've got nothing. They've got no emotion. They've got no one around them. They've got no AI to help them. They are completely and utterly alone at times.
I mean, to the point where Katrina has to come up with a mantra to like be like, I am okay alone because these are all the things that I am and all the things that I've survived to get to this point. And so this is how I can keep being okay, being alone going forward.
Yeah. Remember who she is.
Centers her. Yeah.
I actually had some readers write me and say that they've had gone through times in their life where they had to do stuff like that too. So
she's such a powerful character. That's why she and Rika, that's why she's like tied with Rika as my favorite. Yeah.
The Katrina books are the only ones where people say that they've had to put them down because they need a break from them while they're reading, which you don't want to do too much because, like I said, people do read for escape primarily. So you want to make sure that you give them that escape.
There's only like 3 of them, right?
Yeah, they're not that long, actually.
The Katrina books.
The reason why the Katrina books are so short is how hard they were for me to write.
Yeah.
It was just like, it was brutal. And Jill didn't like being around me when I wrote Katrina. I was like really grumpy the whole time because I tend to channel the character a bit as I write.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. There was this story I was writing in college, and it was like a cat and mouse story, so it was dual perspective. And it was like this really creepy older stalker guy going after this like kind of like young college girl kind of thing. And so because I was switching perspectives, I had to be in both of their heads, and I had to stop writing it because being inside the like stalker guy's head, it was too much for me.
This should make us all wonder about Lisa.
And Prime.
Yeah.
But I think we all have that darkness inside of us, and it's just how far we choose to follow it and go.
Yeah. We could all be bad, just like any technology can be bad. We can be good or bad. I really can't talk. I wrote Stavros, so
yes,
I can't. And Stavros might actually be. I think Stavros actually was worse than Prime.
We actually had a reader who didn't have to put the book aside. He actually threw the book. He threw his Kindle. He got so mad at Prime.
As an author, you're kind of like, yes.
I did that with Game of Thrones. I threw it with the Red Wedding. I threw the book and I was like, nope, I can't right now. It happens. People throw books when they're mad at them. Oh my God, in Friends, Joey put Little Women in the freezer.
What?
Joey in Friends, he was Joey Tribbiani. He like didn't like how something was going, so he would put it in the freezer. I think it was the movie, not the book, because probably a book wouldn't fare too well in the freezer.
Or with Joey.
What?
Or with Joey.
Right. But yeah, so if he didn't like how something went, he would just shut it in the freezer.
That's fun. That is great characterization. They wrote Joey really well.
Yeah,
they had a lot of fun with him.
But there are stories I've wanted to do that too.
So we've moved into the total segue part of our podcast, which means it's probably time to wrap it up.
Yeah.
And this time it's Jen.
Oh yeah, it's supposed to bring us back to things, but we already covered all the things.
It's also because I want poor Jenny. She doesn't have daylight savings time where we are, I guess. So it's 12:30 for her instead of 11:30 right now.
Okay.
So we don't want her to.
That's okay. It's midnight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's time.
And you're doing great.
Time
you're like
for
the
bed.
Energizer Bunny.
Yeah. All of us coming from Vegas are probably thinking it's time for bed, no matter what time it is.
That's true, yeah.
So, all right. So with that, I guess we will draw this to a close. Thank you so much for watching or for listening. And we'll see you next time on The Intrepid.
See you, folks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.